They called my marriage a national disgrace, a transparent princess sold to a ruthless eunuch. To the world I'm a pawn, to my father a spy, to my husband a pet. But in this den of wolves, a useless girl holds the sharpest blade. I didn't marry Julian to survive. I married him to conquer. Let the games begin. I sat in the bright red bridal sedan chair. It swayed so much I was nearly nodding off. Through the haze, I could hear the common folk whispering. Not a single blessing. Only mockery. They mocked me, a princess of the realm, because my imperial father had married me off to Julian. But they didn't know this wasn't shame to me. It was leverage. My name is Aurora Mew. I was the invisible princess who spent year after year tucked away in some forgotten corner of the inner palace. My mother was a maid. She died in childbirth the moment I was born, and I was left to be forgotten. I carried the title of princess, yet I was worth less than a chief maid at some master's side. Growing up, I had no one close to me except my wet nurse and one playmate. I rarely even saw my imperial father. My playmate left the year before last. Last year, my wet nurse died too. In this palace, only I remained, alone, unremembered, unnoticed. My imperial father was old now, and often unwell. The crown prince was only 3. Eunuchs ran the court, maternal clans swelled with power, and the enemy kingdom watched like a tiger. With trouble brewing within and without, someone offered my imperial father a rotten idea. Marry off a daughter. But which princess of age in the palaces would agree to such a match? So I, the pitiful girl with a dead mother and an indifferent father, was finally remembered. It just so happened I had come of age last year. It just so happened I had no right to refuse. For the first time I met my imperial father alone. He was a bloated man with cloudy eyes. Here I suddenly had value, to steady the court, balance factions, and pave the road for his son. To keep up appearances that I was indeed a princess, he even gave me a formal title, Rory. Wasn't that just my name? Ching, Rory. It was the first time he had ever called me by name, and only after the head eunuch prompted him. On this journey, get along well with your husband. Don't disgrace the imperial house. I understand. I made a bow that wasn't quite proper. He frowned again. Well, it wasn't my fault. I'd only just learned it. Gongs and drums rang from the imperial city out into the streets, rolling across the whole capital. Everyone knew the glory was for the groom. A fair, long-fingered hand, knuckles sharp and distinct, held mine as I went through every step of the wedding. Only when the old women helped me into the bridal chamber did I finally dare to touch that soft hand. I felt him stiffen. I sat on the wedding bed, dismissed everyone, and lifted the veil myself, looking around. The entire room was drenched in red, and every detail screamed luxury. Even the luminous pearl was enormous, easily a full size larger than the one in my imperial father's imperial study. So this was how a powerful minister lived. I sat casually in a chair and ate the pastries I'd hidden earlier. I hadn't eaten all day. I was starving. Once I'd eaten and drunk my fill, I crossed one leg over the other. It was still early. The groom probably wouldn't come for a while, so I lounged, sipping tea, relaxed to the point of laziness. Creak. The door opened and I happened to be facing it. I snapped upright and looked over. Who was this young man in a red wedding robe? Red lips, white teeth, handsome enough to invite trouble. Who was marrying me today? Julian? But I was supposed to be marrying a vicious eunuch. The person in front of me, no, calling him a man, didn't feel quite right. It took me a full quarter-hour to accept it. This groom was my husband. Julian, the chief of the Eastern Depot. At court, he was someone who could blot out the sky with one hand. Other than Chancellor Sue, maternal grandfather to the crown prince, who could contend with him? Even my aging imperial father had to placate him rather than tame him. And I was the tool meant to placate him. Julian was nicknamed the 9,000-year Lord. In daily life, everyone respectfully called him Old Ancestor. Rumor said the 9,000-year Lord slaughtered without blinking, a ruthless eunuch with countless lives and grudges on his hands. In my mind, I'd pictured a blue-faced monster, hideous and twisted, some filthy old pervert. But the man I met today had red lips and white teeth, clean brows, refined features. If not for the coldness on his face and the frost in his eyes, I might have believed he was a pure, innocent boy. My mind stalled until the groom at the door spoke lazily, "Princess." There wasn't a trace of respect in his voice, only casual indifference. That chill snapped me awake. I shivered, and my first thought wasn't to greet him, it was, oh no, where's my veil? Panicking, I rushed back to the wedding bed. I slapped the veil back over my head, crooked and clumsy, and sat there as if nothing had happened, waiting for Julian to lift it the way tradition demanded. Maybe he hadn't expected that. He let out a strange, unreadable sound and sat down in the chair beside me. After a moment, I blew hard at one corner of the veil and stole a peek at him. He sat where I'd just been, turning dried longans over in a dish. Those dark eyes were on me too, his mood impossible to read. The veil fell again, blocking our view of each other. In a trembling voice, half testing, half coy, I called, "Husband?" As my words landed, something thudded to the floor. Footsteps stopped in front of me. The red veil was flipped up in one swift motion. I looked up at the handsome groom, backlit, and still couldn't help thinking, he's really good-looking. "Husband, you're really good-looking." I was straightforward and not very bright. Whatever came into my head came out of my mouth. "Heh!" He frowned at me, as if trying to see straight through me. I didn't dodge. I blinked my big eyes and let him look all he wanted. "Princess." "Call me Rory," I cut him off, smiling sweetly. "You're taking this pretty well?" He sat down beside me, watching me with that same unreadable gaze. A princess of noble blood marrying me must feel like a grievance. He said it, but there wasn't a shred of guilt on his face. I waved my hand. "Not a grievance, not a grievance. Rory marrying you is Rory's blessing." "Husband?" He lifted a brow, questioning the title. "Yes." I leaned close, bright and innocent. "You and I were matched by imperial decree. We just bowed in the hall. Heaven and earth, parents and witnesses. Now we're husband and wife." I was a girl newly come of age. Saying it still made me blush. I lowered my head shyly and mumbled, "If I call you husband, will you call me wife?" Clearly, Julian wasn't used to my sudden closeness. He leaned back slightly and coughed awkwardly. "Husband," I prompted again, perfectly timed. He hesitated, then brushed it off. "We'll talk about it." He was a eunuch, I was a princess. People said I was marrying down, but truthfully, I was the one reaching above my station. He could throw me aside at any time. He could even kill me, and my imperial father wouldn't pursue it. So if I wanted to live better, I had to flatter him. At least he didn't want to kill me right now. That much preserved the imperial family's face. I had only one goal now. Survive. That night, Julian and I lay on the bed. I tried to shrink into a corner. No touching. No disturbance. Maybe it was his first time sleeping in the same bed as a woman too. In the moonlight spilling through the window, I saw his faintly furrowed brows and tightly pressed lips. Quietly, I crawled out from under my own quilt and lifted the edge of his. "What are you doing?" In the dead of night, his voice sounded especially chilling. I jolted, eyes wide, staring at him. Sure enough, his brows drew tighter, displeasure rising in his eyes. "I'm warming you up." Before he could react, I slipped under his quilt. Cold. So cold. When I helped him change earlier, I'd touched his hand by accident. It was so icy it made me shiver. Now, under his quilt, I could feel it even more. Cold seeped from his whole body. I lowered my head to avoid his gaze, lying to myself. If I don't look at him, he won't notice me. Slowly, I reached out and wrapped my arms around his waist. His clean, sharp scent and the cold against my skin made me even more awake. I held him and didn't move. I waited. But he didn't push me away, and he didn't curse at me. Gradually, I relaxed. The bed was cold, but my eyelids still grew heavy. "Princess." That clear, cool voice came from above my head as I drifted off. "Rory," I corrected him softly. He wasn't used to it and didn't argue. He only continued. "Aren't you cold?" "Cold." I looked up at him pitifully. In the hazy moonlight, his expression looked almost gentle, nothing like the cruelty people described. "Then hug Rory too." I guided his arm beneath my neck, then placed his other hand at my waist. What began as my one-sided clinging became two people warming each other. I didn't care what he thought. Buried in his arms, I kept talking. "Husband, believe it or not, Rory suffered a lot before. Now that I'm married, I'm yours. I hope you'll be good to me." On our wedding night, I told him what my imperial father wanted. It was simple. My imperial father hoped I would win Julian's favor, then stay by his side to watch him, to be a spy, to see whether he was colluding with other princes to rebel. Julian gave a cold snort. "You're sure?" "Huh? How could I not be sure? Was there some other meaning behind it?" I stared at him, startled. He met my eyes. If I wanted to rebel, I could just kill the emperor and put the young crown prince on the throne. He said treasonous words as easily as breathing. Wasn't he afraid I'd report him? He looked at me deeply. The pressure in the room grew heavy, unseen but suffocating. Will the princess report me? It felt like someone had tightened a cord around my neck. I could hardly breathe. After a long moment, I complained faintly, "Rory. You have to call me Rory. Go to sleep. You won't have a chance to tell anyone." He closed his eyes, his breathing evened out, as if he were ready to sleep. And he was right. I truly had no chance. Because the next day, I discovered that all the people my imperial father had sent with me were gone. They'd likely been reassigned, or... terrifying. My marriage changed the court's balance. Julian went from a chief of the Eastern Depot, whom everyone treated with surface respect and secret disgust, to the imperial family's son-in-law. I wasn't sharp, but I finally understood. My imperial father hadn't married his daughter to Julian, so I could spy. More than that, he wanted to tell Julian, "From now on, you're the crown prince's brother-in-law. No need to seize the throne. You're now imperial kin." At the same time, Julian's status rose again. Even if the crown prince ascended while still young, Julian could contend with the chancellor. After all, the chancellor had a son. Julian didn't. My imperial father must have weighed that. So it didn't matter that Julian reassigned the people planted at my side. My imperial father never truly needed me to pass him messages. To put it plainly, he never thought much of me. But after 16 years of being pathetic, I suddenly became full of drive. I swore I would win Julian's heart. Someday he would hold the court in his palm, and the benefits for me would be endless. Sure enough, after I showed enthusiasm and loyalty on our wedding night, he didn't make things hard for me. The people in the residence treated me with full respect, and I was good at climbing once someone offered a hand. As long as he was home, I clung to him. When he wrote, I ground ink for him. When he ate, I placed dishes at his side. I even knocked on the door when he bathed, offering to scrub his back. "Get lost." "Okay." I bounced back to my room, ignoring the servants' looks, half disdain, half admiration. 2 months passed in fawning and sweet talk, and the Mid-Autumn Festival drew near. That morning, as I helped him dress, I asked whether he would come back for dinner. "I will." "Then Rory will wait for you." When I smiled and saw him out, he even patted my head, like he was soothing a pet. What if I stopped growing taller because of that? I spent most of the day in the kitchen, working hard to prepare a full dinner for Julian, trying my best to look like a virtuous wife. But night fell like spilled ink. The food had gone completely cold. Julian still hadn't returned, and no one had come with word. Unease crawled through me. I reheated the dishes, packed them into a food box, and took a carriage to find him. When I reached the room where Julian was on duty, he wasn't there. I carried the food in and stubbornly waited. It wasn't until curfew that I finally saw him. Covered in blood, his face cold enough to raise gooseflesh. I had never seen him like that. Maybe the Julian I saw every day was too normal. Seeing him now, like a demon judge from the underworld, my pupils shrank, my heart pounded. I called shakily, "Husband?" Julian lifted his head to look at me. In the candle's shadows, his dark gaze was sharp enough to tear me apart. I guessed the blood wasn't his. It was what was left behind from an interrogation. No servant outside dared speak. Everyone stood silent, heads lowered, barely breathing. I forced myself to be brave and moved toward him, step by step. My hands shook like a sieve as I supported him and helped him sit by the small couch. I noticed a bloody scratch on the back of his hand, likely from a slip during torture. I quickly ordered warm water and ointment. "You're hurt? How could you be so careless?" I scolded, half complaining. Julian lifted his eyelids and gave a cold laugh. "Worried about me?" "Obviously." I shot him an annoyed look and kept talking. "Rory will put medicine on it. And don't let it touch water for the next few days." I gently spread the ointment over the wound. Julian's hand twitched slightly. The smell was sharp enough to sting my eyes. I looked up at him through watery eyes and asked in a low voice, "Does it hurt?" He watched me lazily. After a long while, he finally said, "It hurts." "That doesn't fit your image at all." I paused, then smiled, and like my wet nurse used to do for me, I blew softly on the wound. Hoo, I'll blow it and it won't hurt anymore." Go wash up and change. I'll have them prepare something to eat. Nom. I covered his mouth before he could refuse. Under his cold, angry gaze, I shoved him into the inner room. He stank. It was late. I didn't bother returning to the residence. There was a place to rest here. I could make do for the night. I carried in freshly cooked congee and knocked lightly. Husband, can Rory come in? No. His voice was cold, but I didn't care. I poked my head in and saw Julian leaning against the headboard in a simple inner robe, clean and handsome. I walked over with the bowl and sat beside him. Husband, I'll feed you. He ignored me. Didn't even look at me. Ignoring me? Fine, we'll see who can be more shameless. As I blew on the congee, I rambled to myself. Before I married, the matrons taught me about bedroom pleasures. I glanced sideways. Sure enough, he was looking at me. One of them was feeding wine mouth to mouth. Of course, there's no wine today, but congee works too. It's kind of disgusting, but that's what you like, isn't it? I blinked at him and pretended I was about to take a sip. Give it to me. He snatched the bowl and drank on his own. That night, we slept holding each other. It was like usual, but I knew something had changed. His hand stayed around my shoulder, lightly rubbing. I knew he wasn't asleep. He knew I was awake too. Slowly, I lifted my head and brushed my lips against his jaw. His body stiffened. I whispered, Husband, Rory isn't afraid. Rory will always stay with you. Yes, I wasn't afraid. Even if you, Julian, have killed countless people, even if you've done every evil, I wasn't afraid. Even if no one behind you dares step forward, I will stand before you and walk toward you, one step at a time. In the past, even with power that shook the world, no one held you at midnight, warming your body, warming your heart. Now you have me. When you're hurt, I apply medicine. When your stomach aches, I feed you congee. I will always stay with you, husband. I didn't say these words aloud to Julian, but I believed he understood. He understood what I meant. My imperial father died on the third day after mid-autumn. Only consort Shu, the crown prince's birth mother, was with him. She said he collapsed without warning. When the imperial physicians arrived, he was already dead. The story didn't hold up under scrutiny, but no one was going to scrutinize it. The crown prince was 3, and he inherited the throne as the new emperor. A change of reign was nothing unusual, but lately, one thing made me furious. The newly installed Empress Dowager Shu was a beautiful young woman of 25. Her father was Chancellor Shu. The two of them were ambitious, yet not of one mind. The daughter wanted to rule from behind the curtain, to be a female sovereign over the realm. The father wanted to hold the emperor hostage, to command the nobles, to be regent, perhaps even emperor. They looked united, but they were divided. Neither could do without the other, yet each wanted to kick the other away. So the foolish pair decided to bargain with a tiger. They tried to curry favor with Julian to expand their power. That alone would have been one thing, but Empress Dowager Su's method was disgusting. When I leaned close to Julian and caught the scent of powder and perfume on him, I knew exactly what she'd done. I huffed and shoved him, then sat down and sulked, furious, all on my own. After what happened that day, Julian had grown much more intimate with me. Seeing me like this, he smiled and came over, ruffling my neatly combed hair. He said casually, I'm just playing along with her. What are you mad about? Playing along? If I played along with someone else, what would you do? I didn't dare ask. I wasn't ready to die. But you're my husband. How can you be with another woman? I snapped, my voice too loud in my anger. Maybe he hadn't seen this side of me before. He froze, his face darkening, but he still spoke patiently. It's only a stalling tactic. Then he snorted. Besides, nothing can really happen. My chest ached, but I didn't want to show weakness in front of him. I slapped his hand off my head and ran out. Servants called after me, but I heard Julian's voice. Don't chase her. I stood in the street, not knowing where to go. Back to the inner palace? But it had never been my home. To the Princess Manor? When I married, my imperial father never granted me one. An inn? I had no money. In the end, when night grew deep, I returned to the residence, head hanging. Other than here, I had nowhere to go. Heh. Julian stood in the courtyard. When he saw me, he let out a meaningless sound. I thought the princess might have somewhere better to go. His sarcasm hurt. I had walked 99 steps toward you, and you wouldn't even give me the last one. Tears blurred my vision until Julian no longer looked real. I bent my knees, and to everyone's shock, including Julian's. I knelt. The late autumn night was cold, my voice shook with it. Rory knows I was wrong. Please forgive me, Chief. Only then did I understand. Julian and I had never been equals, no matter how hard I tried to live like husband and wife. In the end, I lived by relying on him. I couldn't throw tantrums. I was nothing more than a pet. My birthday was in winter. In the past, my wet nurse celebrated it for me, one bowl of longevity noodles. It was the warmest moment I ever had in the palace. This year, I didn't want to celebrate. So on my birthday, I lived as usual, no different from any other day. But at dusk, servants came for me and brought me onto a pleasure boat. Julian stood at the bow and personally took my hand, leading me inside. His manner was gentle, almost tender. We never mentioned that day again. And there was no more powdery perfume on him. Everything seemed to return to how it was before. Except I no longer called him husband. Every day I dressed him, served him at meals, saw him off to court, and at night slept in his arms. I smiled all day, as if nothing had ever happened. But I no longer went into his study to bother him. I didn't act spoiled. I didn't spend half a day cooking him a full table of dishes. And I certainly didn't go searching for him in panic when he didn't come home at night. I became a well-behaved puppet who only knew how to smile. No drama. No trouble. Because of that change, he often watched me in silence, rubbing my hand, and said softly, "Rory, smile." I immediately put on a wide smile, head lowered at just the right angle. "Ugly," he said. "Yes, I thought so too." He pulled me onto his lap and into his arms and said gently, "Rory, happy birthday." So he knew. I lifted a proper smile, slipped out of his hold a little, and bowed. "Thank you for remembering, Chief." His gaze sank. He dragged me back into his arms. "Rory, like before. Was it an order or a plea?" Either way, I poured him a cup of wine and said hoarsely, "Rory has always been the same as before." He drank it, one cup after another, until he was faintly drunk. He buried his face at my neck, voice rough, with a hint of grievance. "Rory, don't be mad anymore. Call me husband, all right?" My lashes trembled hard, but I still didn't speak. He turned his head to look at me, eyes slightly red. "Rory, say it. Just say it. Husband." Husband. His apricot-red lips brushed the corner of mine. I tensed and grabbed his collar, my heart hammering so hard it felt like I might stop breathing. The arm around my waist tightened, pulling me into him. His breathing deepened. Warm breath washed over my face, sending a shiver through my whole body. Before I could faint from it, he finally eased back a little. He pressed his forehead to mine and asked, panting, "Rory, what birthday gift do you want?" "Anything?" Anything." I stared straight at him and said quietly, "Even the chief's heart?" He lifted a thumb to rub the corner of my eye. He smiled slightly, like he was coaxing me, and was about to speak, but I cut him off. I'm joking." I lowered my head shyly. "As long as I can stay by your side, I'm satisfied. I don't need gifts." He lifted my face and stared at me, anger in his eyes. Rory, he was angry, but wasn't this what he wanted? Now he wanted me not to keep my distance. Under his pressure, I decided to say my wish. "I want a residence," I said each word clearly. "A residence that belongs to me." He froze. After a long moment, he murmured, "Isn't this your home now?" Seeing him dazed like that, I felt a strange, sharp satisfaction. For the first time, I dared to call him by name. "Julian, I want a home I can't be thrown out of. I don't want to stand in the street with nowhere to go." The more I spoke, the worse it hurt. It felt like someone was twisting my heart hard. Tears streamed down my face before I even realized it, yet I still sobbed stubbornly. "I want a home that's mine." "All right, I'll give it to you." When the imperial decree appointing me Grand Princess was placed in my hands, I was still in a daze. All I'd ever wanted was a place to settle down. I never expected Julian to go straight to the Emperor and have me made Grand Princess. He even granted me the largest princess manor since the founding of the Great Liang Empire. The manor was still under construction. I wouldn't be able to move in until early autumn next year. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered in my ear, "Happy? When the princess manor is finished, we'll move in." "We?" I turned my head, puzzled. He smiled, teasing, "When the time comes, Grand Princess, don't kick me out." Still, I was truly glad, because I knew Julian held me in his heart. Otherwise, he could have joined hands with the Empress Dowager to suppress the Chancellor. Yet he refused, because of me. If he didn't love me, How could he grant me such supreme honor for nothing more than a small birthday wish? And besides, husband and wife are one. Now that I held this title, those officials started spreading talk among the people again. They claimed Julian covered the sky with one hand and had no respect for the throne. Which wasn't exactly false. But why did they have to say I'd risen on someone else's coattails? You're the coattail. Because the Princess Manor was being built, I went there often for a stroll. I didn't understand much, but I always greeted the workers and chatted with them, trying to look approachable. Until one day, I sent my attendants away and met a laborer repairing the gardens. I wasn't completely without resources. Before my old playmate left, he'd left me many things. The emperor was young. The chancellor was always at odds with the Eastern Depot, and the Empress Dowager liked to interfere whenever she pleased. The three sides were busy fighting each other. No one had time for me. So I began entering and leaving the Princess Manor frequently, under the pretense of overseeing the work. When the manor was finally completed the following year, I stood at the gate and looked up at the plaque. The calligraphy had been written personally by the great master Julian. He insisted on calling himself that. Only then did my heart finally settle. In this capital, I had a home of my own at last. From now on, no one could drive me out of here, unless I chose to walk out myself. I worked in high spirits for half a month before the move was finally done. That night, I lay on the big bed in the Princess Manor, tossing and turning, too excited to sleep. Julian grew irritated by my restlessness. He pulled me into his arms and pinned me down with some force. Stop it. Sleep. I have court tomorrow. I tilted my face up, innocent. But I don't. As his eyes slowly narrowed, I buried my head against his chest and pretended to sleep. After a long while, I finally came to my senses. Wait, this is my home. Why am I afraid of him? I lifted my chin, ready to argue, only to find Julian already fast asleep. The shadows cast by his long lashes looked especially gentle. He really had been too tired lately. Another winter came. The situation at court was tense, yet it had settled into a strange balance, until the day of the first snowfall. Julian had promised to take the day off and stay with me, but early that morning, someone from the Eastern Depot arrived with urgent news. He left at once. I stood under the corridor and watched the snow drift down. I tugged up a disdainful smile. The news of Empress Dowager Shu's sudden death reached me in the afternoon. No funeral bell. No mourning hall. She didn't even enter the imperial mausoleum. She was simply wrapped in coarse straw matting and carried out. Because she was pregnant. Last year, she tried to seduce Julian. I made a huge scene. Julian sent her a real man disguised as a eunuch. He never expected her to dare to get pregnant. She tried to get rid of it in secret. But Julian learned of it quickly. So did the chancellor. How could anything stay secret in the palace? As for how she died, Chancellor Shu killed her with his own hands. He shouted about how he had failed the late emperor and failed the realm. The court's power structure shifted again. The Eastern Depot grew stronger. And after the Empress Dowager's death, the emperor became far more distant toward the chancellor. After all, that was the man who had killed his mother. Now, Julian had become the person the emperor trusted most. Julian had been positively radiant lately. He kept smiling as he stroked my cheek, saying I was his lucky star. Marrying me, he said, was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Do you really think marrying Rory was a good thing? I curled up in his arms, looked up at his jaw, and asked softly. He lowered his gaze, kissed the corner of my lips, then murmured into my ear, Of course, Rory is my favorite. Yes. Inside the Princess Manor, everything was calm and peaceful. But outside, people in tea houses and taverns said all kinds of ugly things. They said a eunuch had married a princess and become part of the royal clan. They said he was more lawless than ever, holding power in his hands and disregarding the imperial house. Some even mocked him. A man with no roots, what use was power to him? They didn't know that if Julian didn't fight for it, he wouldn't even be able to stay alive. I wrapped my arms tightly around his waist, trying to give him strength without words. Julian, I said slowly, speaking his name. I'm here. I'm here too. I liked Julian. I didn't know when it began. Maybe it was the wedding night, when he pushed the door open, bathed in candlelight, wearing red, stunning. Or maybe it was after he interrogated a prisoner, his face smeared with blood, vicious and cold. Yet when I treated his wounds, his eyes looked plainly wronged, and my heart softened. Or maybe it was when he gave up Empress Dowager Shu as an ally for my sake, almost losing his advantage in court. But most of all, it was because he gave me a home, a manor that belonged to me. He was willing to swallow his status, willing to cast aside his pride. No matter how others spat on him, he still moved into this manor to live with me. He gave me love. He fought for my supreme honor. He gave me a devotion meant for me alone. This man was my husband. How could I bring myself to kill him? Yes, I was going to kill him. I once had a playmate. His name was Gabriel Pai. He was a prince from the enemy kingdom, sent as a hostage when he was a child. In the inner palace, we were neighbors. Later, as the enemy kingdom grew stronger, they brought him back. When he left, I couldn't bear it. We sat under the corridor and watched the moon all night. In the end, he left me half of his influence in the capital. He said he wanted me to live well. He hoped that even from 1,000 miles away, he could still look after me. But I used to live in the palace. Many things were inconvenient, so I devised a plan and had father arrange my marriage to Julian. After we married, I was involved in everything, including father's death, the news of the Empress Dowager's pregnancy, even the insults in the streets. Besides the chancellor spreading them, I fanned the flames too. The worker I met at the Princess Manor was one of the men Gabriel left me. He had him pass me a message: kill Julian, throw the capital into chaos. When the chancellor gained the upper hand, I would unite the capital's forces and, under the banner of removing traitors from the emperor's side, eliminate the chancellor. Then, he said, he would represent the enemy kingdom and secure 100 years of peace with Great Liang Empire. The key step in all this was killing Julian. A man as cautious as Julian. Aside from me, no one could get close to him now. Deep at night, I opened my eyes quietly. I studied the sleeping profile beside me. Slowly, I lifted a finger and traced his outline in the air, just short of touching. I'd calculated everything except my feelings for him. I never expected to fall so deep. If I didn't kill him, everything I'd done before would become the blade that killed me. And the charge of colluding with a prince of the enemy kingdom would leave me infamous for all time. I slipped past him and padded barefoot over the icy floor. At the dressing table, I took a small bottle from the drawer. It was the poison they had given me. Fine, I would use it to end my own life. My eyes burned, blurred with tears. In old plays they always sang, "In this world you can't choose your own fate." I never believed it. Now I did. The sorrow in those words was bone deep. With trembling hands, I raised the bottle to my lips. I couldn't bear to leave Julian. I couldn't bear to lose his love. Don't forget me. My heart ached as if it were being wrung out. Just as I was about to tip my head back, a hand shot out from behind. Smack! It struck my wrist and the bottle flew to the ground. I spun around in shock. Julian's brows were drawn tight, his face thunderous. "What are you doing?" He yanked my arm and hauled me up from the stool. I stammered for a long time, but couldn't explain. I couldn't exactly say, "I meant to kill you." But I couldn't do it, so I decided to kill myself. He glanced down at my bare feet. Then he bent and scooped me up, carrying me angrily to the bed and tossing me onto it. My backside throbbed with pain, but I didn't dare provoke him. I could only rub it in silence. His face looked even colder in the moonlight. His heaving chest and harsh breathing gave away his fury. He suddenly leaned in and gripped my jaw, glaring at me. His voice was low and hoarse, like a judge from hell. "What was that?" My eyes darted away. I couldn't meet his gaze. He tightened his grip. "Look at me." His eyes were deep, fixed on me, as if he wanted to see straight through my heart. After a long pause, he spoke softly. "Weren't you going to kill me? Why drink it yourself?" I stared at him, stunned. How did he know I meant to kill him? Every hair on my body stood on end. Cold sweat broke out along my back. I began to tremble, terrified. Had he seen through all my tricks? Did he find them ridiculous? Had he been deliberately playing along, step by step? Then, what about his love? He released my face and pulled me into a crushing embrace, burying his face at my throat. I felt the chill of his whole body. In his breath against my collar, I felt his desolation and despair. Slowly, I raised my hand and touched his back, testing the waters. "Julian?" He held me so tightly it hurt. Something slipped into my collar, wet against my skin, and I shivered. "Aurora Moo," he finally said, voice rough. "If you dare die, I'll slaughter this imperial city and be buried with you." My lashes trembled violently. My chest tightened. So he loved me, that much. He knew every thought I had. He even knew I wanted to kill him. Yet his anger now was because I tried to die. His tears, his icy body, he was afraid of losing me. "You're bewitched, hopelessly in love with me. But have you ever thought, am I worth it?" Chancellor Shu was finally pushed to the edge. On New Year's Day, the capital was hung with lanterns and filled with celebration. But the New Year's Eve palace banquet was drawn taut like a bowstring. Everyone was trembling. As Grand Princess, I sat below the Emperor in a seat of honor, with Julian beside me. Since that night, he'd grown even more attached to me. When he looked at me, his eyes were full of endless affection. They say a person's eyes don't lie when they're in love. Really? Don't they? "Rory, open up." At this banquet where everyone had their own schemes, even the young emperor sat with his head lowered in silence. Only Julian, at my side, picked up a piece of jade shrimp, my favorite, and held it to my lips. I was trying to shrink into my seat, chanting in my heart, "Don't see me. Don't see me. Let them fight. Just don't drag me in." I stole a glance at Chancellor Shu's iron-gray face and the sharp gaze he shot my way. I shuddered. Julian didn't care about anyone watching. He moved his chopsticks closer. "Isn't it your favorite?" "Ah." I quickly swallowed it. I didn't taste a thing before I forced it down. "Good?" Julian asked, blinking bright eyes with a smile. I nodded at random, then leaned back, trying to use Julian's body to block the Chancellor's stare. But Julian wouldn't let me. He patted my back and said in a low voice, "Sit up straight." Then he turned to the Chancellor. His tone was far from polite. "Chancellor Shu, you're staring at the Grand Princess with such disrespect. Do you know your crime?" "Heh." The Chancellor snorted without a trace of deference. "A eunuch, and the daughter of a low-born servant. They deserve the main seat?" So that was it. The masks were off. With that single line, the already chilly banquet fell into utter silence. No one spoke. I trembled with fear. Julian's hand rested on my back, patting gently to calm me. He kept his eyes on the Chancellor, dark and cold. Yet he spoke to me. "Rory, protect yourself. Want me to kill everyone who looks down on you?" His voice wasn't loud, but in the silence, everyone heard it clearly. "Julian, don't you dare," the Chancellor roared. "Men, seize this eunuch. Today I will remove the traitor at the Emperor's side." "Remove the traitor at the Emperor's side?" Of course. Neither he nor Julian was a good man. Suddenly, guards poured into the hall, guards who looked like the Chancellor's men. I rushed to the young Emperor, scooped him into my arms, and hid with him under a table, trying not to draw attention. "Sister, I'm scared." The child shook in my arms, trembling so hard it echoed my own. "I don't want to be Emperor. I don't want it anymore. Don't say stupid things. Don't be afraid. Julian is here. He'll protect us." I stroked his head as I spoke. I didn't know whether I was comforting him or trying to convince myself. If the Chancellor won today, the Emperor and I would die for sure. If Julian won, then maybe. Ever since that night, I'd been wondering why Julian loved me. What was there to love? But if it was for use, what use was I? He knew Gabriel's influence in the capital. He even knew we had plotted to kill him. Yet Julian didn't hold it against me. He treated me even better. What was he trying to get from me? Maybe today? I would find out. Blades met in the hall. The shriek of metal made the young Emperor and me cling to each other, not daring to make a sound. Thankfully, the chaos didn't last long. The capital's guard army suddenly smashed through the palace gates and stormed in. 20,000 troops stood in perfect lines across the open ground outside the hall. Their presence pressed down like a mountain. "How can they be here so fast?" I heard the Chancellor's furious shout, edged with panic. I let out a small breath. The Mu family throne was safe. But I relaxed too soon. I didn't know when the Chancellor reached our table. With one sweep, he flipped it over. The Emperor and I looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Rory!" Julian shouted my name from farther away, his voice tight with panic and helplessness. In the lamplight, I saw the Chancellor's twisted face. My mind went blank. I couldn't move. He didn't waste time. He grabbed the young Emperor, locked him against his chest, and pressed a long sword to the child's soft neck. One slip and the boy would die. "Sister! Sister!" The child's cry, shaking with fear, drilled into my ears. We were siblings, but we had barely met. We weren't close, we were practically strangers. Yet at this moment in Great Liang Empire, we were the only blood family either of us had. In this crisis, he didn't think to beg Julian, the man with real power. He didn't think to beg his own maternal grandfather, who now wanted him dead. He begged me instead, his powerless, timid older sister. Maybe that was what blood meant. Everyone stared at the sword in the Chancellor's hand. He kept roaring, demanding they drop their weapons and retreat from the hall, or he would kill the Emperor. Until only 4 remained in the hall: the Chancellor, the Emperor, Julian, and me. Julian, the Chancellor hissed, a eunuch is a slave for a day, a slave for life. You think you can. He forgot I was behind him. It was my first time attending the New Year's Eve banquet as Grand Princess. Julian dressed me in full splendor. My hair was packed with jingling hairpins. I could have plucked one at random and stabbed someone with it. Chancellor Shu never imagined that I, the trembling, submissive daughter of a low-born servant, would take his life. Even in death, his eyes were wide, filled with disbelief. He couldn't rest in peace. I didn't spare a glance for his ugly corpse. I pulled the 4-year-old child into my arms. His face was streaked with tears. He was too frightened to react. Holding the young emperor, I stood on the high steps. Julian stood below, looking up at me from far away. Only then did I realize the palace was so vast that we couldn't see each other's expressions clearly. But I knew he wasn't surprised by my sudden ruthlessness, or by how calm I was now. He had seen through me long ago. Now there were only the 3 of us in this great hall. No matter what happened, no one outside would know. Only the living could decide what the truth would be. Julian, I said softly, this realm belongs to the Mu family. Julian looked up at me. Then he slowly dropped to his knees, bowed, and said something I never expected. Your servant greets the Empress. I stared at him, kneeling and kowtowing. My chest felt so tight I could barely breathe. For some reason, my eyes suddenly burned. After a long moment, I said hoarsely, Julian, you want to raise me as emperor? Yes. He lifted his gaze. Even at this distance, I could feel the gentleness around him. Rory, I want you to be the most honored woman in Great Liang Empire. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then I spoke again. My eyes were on Julian below, but my words were for the child in my arms. Ethan, do you still want to be emperor? No. He clung to my neck, tears smearing my robe. Sobbing, I don't want to be emperor, sister, I don't want to. All right, then I will. Kill him, Julian said suddenly, his eyes sharp and cold as he looked at the child in my arms. He can't be left alive. When he grows up, he'll be trouble. Sister, sister. The child seemed to understand Julian meant him. He hugged me tighter, crying out to me, trusting me completely. I patted his head to soothe him. Then I looked at Julian, still kneeling below. I thought for a long time, and in the end I spared the child. Boom, boom, boom. Fireworks exploded beyond the imperial city walls. It should have been a day for families to be together. Yet inside these red walls and green tiles, everything was in ruins. Not a single citizen in the city knew that while they welcomed the new year in joy, the throne of Great Liang Empire had already changed hands. On the first day of the new year, a proclamation went out nationwide. The emperor was young, and he abdicated to Grand Princess Aurora Mu. From that day on, I became Great Liang Empire's first empress, from the daughter of a low-born servant to the most honored woman of this dynasty. I knew the court, the people, and Gabriel Pei far away would all be dissatisfied with this outcome. But the officials didn't dare make a sound. Deep down, they feared imperial power. The common people didn't dare discuss it freely either. The Eastern Depot had claws everywhere. As for Gabriel, what he wanted was chaos in Great Liang Empire, so he could take advantage and strike. He forgot one thing. I wasn't a fool. From the moment he left me those forces, I knew what he intended. And it was also then that I thought, even if I wasn't favored, even if I lived in this palace like an invisible person, I was still of Great Liang Empire. This was my home. I would protect it. Even if Gabriel was the only playmate in those years who never despised me, he was still a prince of the enemy kingdom. What he left me wasn't protection. It was ambition. If he could have ambition, why couldn't I? Why couldn't I have a home of my own? Wasn't this nation my home? So from the very beginning, what I wanted was to become the master of this country. First, I won Julian over and made myself someone he couldn't ignore. I drove a wedge between the Chancellor and Empress Dowager Shu. Then I broke Julian's alliance with the Empress Dowager. I played the poor, pitiful thing and begged for a home of my own so I could contact the outside more easily. After I realized he loved me, I let him discover my connection to Gabriel. I let him believe I was forced into killing him, but couldn't bear it, that I would rather die myself than watch him die. That way, he would love me more deeply. And no matter what happened later, he would stand on my side. In secret, I spread rumors in the Chancellor's name. I pushed Julian to suppress him even more harshly. A cornered dog will jump the wall, let alone a Chancellor. The Imperial guards at that banquet looked like they were protecting the young Emperor. In truth, they were mine. I had planned to kill the young Emperor in the chaos, severely wound Julian, and take the throne myself. I just didn't expect Julian to offer me the throne directly, willing to become my subject. And that child really did know how to find shelter. Calling me sister over and over softened my heart. Fine, keeping him alive could still be useful. Before I'd even warmed the throne beneath me, news came from the frontier. The enemy kingdom had been stirring at the border, seemingly provoking trouble, as if they meant to start an incident. At court, opinions split into two camps. One side said it was only provocation and no soldiers had died. Since I had just ascended the throne, I should rule with peace. The other side called for war. They argued that a great nation like ours could not be challenged at will. Their buzzing arguments gave me a headache. I lowered my eyes to Julian, standing off to the side, silent from beginning to end. I wondered what he thought. It was hard to decide for now. I waved a hand, ending the court session. We would speak again tomorrow, but I kept Julian behind. We walked along the long palace path. The attendants followed far behind, not daring to approach. Julian didn't walk beside me. He stayed a step back behind my right shoulder. "What do you think?" I stopped and turned to ask. He bent slightly and saluted with respect. "I believe we can fight." He was much taller than me. In the past, he would hold me in his arms. I would look up at his jaw and sometimes bite him, just to show how I felt. Now I could see the top of my own head reflected in his posture. I could see his respect and his distance. Everyone knew the Grand Princess had once married a eunuch with a grand bridal procession for 10 miles. But everyone also tacitly forgot that the Empress now had a husband. Since my accession, no one mentioned it. Not even Julian. He addressed me as ruler and subject. By day, in the imperial study, he taught me how officials were tangled like roots. He explained the twists hidden in memorials. He even told me how a sovereign controlled people. Before the palace gates were locked at night, he would leave on his own. He never crossed boundaries. He never gave others a reason to gossip about me. Yet every night, he returned to the Grand Princess's manor. He slept in the room that had once been ours. How pitiful. The wife he'd married openly, properly, became Empress, and now he acted as if he didn't even deserve to look at her. But he was the one who placed me on the throne with his own hands. In truth, I understood the enemy kingdom well. They were growing stronger, yes, but to confront great Leon Empire head-on would still be like striking stone with an egg. Besides, their king was old and didn't like war. It was Gabriel who wanted to use this war to earn military merit. He needed it to secure his position and to add weight for his future bid for the throne. Sadly for him, I couldn't let him live that long. The day Julian led the army out was early autumn. After 2 straight days of rain, the capital finally cleared. I stood atop the city gate and personally saw the troops off. I shouted the oath with them. I watched their determined backs as they marched to war. Julian wore armor and rode a tall horse in the middle of the formation. He looked fearless and radiant. I wondered, when he married me, did he look like this too? Yesterday I went to the Grand Princess's manor to see him off alone. I told him Gabriel had to die this time. He could not become the enemy kingdom's king. The consequences would be endless. Before returning to the palace, beneath the plaque he had written with his own hand, I looked at Julian, still so respectful. I couldn't hold back anymore. In a storm of stunned stares, I gently wrapped my arms around him, just like before. But this time, he didn't hold me close. Instead, flustered, he carefully pushed me away. His voice was humble, almost pleading. "Empress, I'm not worthy." Seeing the once proud man ground down into the dust made my heart clench with pain. A bleak pressure surged up. My eyes blurred until I could hardly make him out. I ignored the servants around us. I fought only to see him clearly. My voice shook as I said, "Julian, Rory will wait for you to come back." I didn't say we. I used the childhood name he used to call me. He slowly raised his eyes. A spark flickered in them, then vanished at once, leaving only loneliness. "Julian, when you return safely, let Ethan be raised by you, all right?" He stared at me blankly for a long time without answering. I asked again, "All right?" Suddenly, tiny points of starlight burst in his eyes. His eyes reddened, wet with tears, and he smiled. "All right? What I didn't say was, when you return, will you move into the palace? From now on, will we sleep in the same bed? Will we grow old together? Let you teach Ethan. He will become a good emperor in the future. When the realm is at peace and we grow older, let him continue to rule this world. We may never have children in this life, but Ethan can still care for us in our old age." I didn't say these things, but he had to understand. The war lasted from autumn into winter. It wasn't truly victorious until early summer the next year. During that time, reports arrived again and again, some good, some bad. Every letter was in Julian's handwriting, and at the end he always added, "I hope my empress is well." That man, Gabriel Pye, was killed by Julian with a single arrow. They said he died horribly, his face twisted with unwillingness. I carried a food box and wandered slowly to the steps where we often sat. I didn't care about the dust on the ground. I sent the attendants away and sat alone, eating the sugar cakes we once loved most. This sugar cake tastes awful. Back then, we had nothing. He would sneak into the imperial kitchen and buy them from an old eunuch. I used to think it was the best thing in the world. Now it was hard to swallow. I sat there for a long time. I tried to speak more than once, but I didn't know where to begin. When the sun finally set, I stood up, patted the dust from my clothes, lowered my head, and said in a hoarse voice, "Safe travels, Brother Fay. Thank you for the sugar cakes. Thank you for your company. Thank you for saying you'd protect me for life. Rory will always remember you. I'm sorry." Extra. Ethan Moo. Part 1. My name is Ethan Moo. I was the previous emperor of the Great Liang Empire, and I will be the next emperor as well. The current emperor is my older sister. She is a remarkable woman. She has been on the throne for 10 years. The people live in peace, the harvests are plentiful, and the surrounding kingdoms all bow their heads in submission. None dare cause trouble. Behind every successful empress, there is a good imperial consort. That would be my brother-in-law, Julian, the former chief eunuch of the Eastern Depot. When I was emperor, I was still young. All I knew was that this very handsome man was a bad person. That was what my mother and my maternal grandfather told me. But later, he entered the palace and became my brother-in-law. He laid down all his power. He personally returned military command to my sister. From that day on, he never interfered in court affairs again. He stayed quietly in the inner palace, serving as my sister's anchor. When my sister told me he would raise and teach me from then on, I was secretly delighted. Because my sister, usually gloomy, rarely smiling, would light up the moment she saw him. Her smiling eyes and bright teeth were dazzling. He was a refined gentleman. Every gesture carried the ease of nobility. He didn't resemble a servant in the slightest. He taught me to read and write, to recite poetry, to study the 4 books and 5 classics, and even the arts of rulership. He told me that whether you are a person or an emperor, you must keep a benevolent heart. You must not kill without cause and heap up sin. So in my young heart, he became the finest presence in the world, my teacher, my friend, even like a brother and a father. When I heard people gossiping behind his back, calling him a eunuch, saying he was cruel and domineering, saying that even in the inner palace he couldn't behave himself, that he forced my sister to take no other consorts, that he was vicious, I was furious. My sister and my brother-in-law truly loved each other. Later, for a time, those officials had nothing better to do. Every day at court they urged my sister to expand the inner palace and produce heirs. At first, my sister still tried to reason with them. She said one imperial consort was enough and that the throne could be passed to me. But later, perhaps they'd gone too long without seeing her temper, they actually began slipping portraits, one after another, of noble young men from the capital, into memorial after memorial. When my sister saw them, her face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. She ordered them all taken out and burned. Then she said to me, utterly righteous, "Don't tell your brother-in-law." Too late, I'd already hidden one, and before dinner I handed it to Julian for appraisal. There was no helping it. Compared with those fluttering beauties outside, I liked my gentle, refined brother-in-law more. That night, my sister was said to have been shut out of the sleeping hall. Inside, Julian spoke coolly, with a trace of grievance. "I see the emperor has plenty of energy. Why not go to the imperial study and look over the portraits in those memorials?" The moment my sister heard that, she understood. After cursing me as a traitor in her heart, she hurried to coax him through the crack in the door. According to the palace servants later, that night my sister cursed the court officials outside the sleeping hall for nearly an hour. Then she stood in the courtyard and shouted, "Julian is the best husband in the world. I want no one else. I only want Julian." Hearing that, he rushed out and covered her mouth, complaining, "How can the emperor behave so improperly? If word reaches the officials tomorrow, they'll say I'm clinging to the emperor and acting spoiled because of favor." My sister wrapped her arms around him and coaxed, "Whoever dares say that, I'll have him beaten and dock his pay." "You're not angry anymore? Rory is so cold." Hearing the servant's description, I shivered. But in the end, Julian personally stepped in and settled the matter. At the time, my sister was meeting with the ministers. I sat to the side studying. A servant suddenly reported that Julian had come to deliver some food. I was puzzled. Since entering the palace, he had never appeared anywhere state affairs were discussed. What was going on today? Julian came in, proper and composed, looking completely at ease. He first gave me a gentle glance. Then, smiling, he looked to my sister, his eyes full of tenderness and devotion. I was used to that look and thought nothing of it. But the ministers were seeing it for the first time. Their faces showed a flicker of disdain. Then, Julian turned to face them. The hardness and chill in his eyes made even me, sitting some distance away, tremble. It was a kind of commanding presence I hadn't seen since he began teaching me. In that instant, I finally believed it. The Julian people spoke of, the cruel, bloodthirsty, overbearing Julian, had truly existed. Julian needed only a single look before he walked to my sister's side and gently fed her a few pastries. Ugh, what a disgusting couple. Perhaps that brief intimidation reminded them who the current imperial consort used to be. The ministers who had been unhappy with Julian now looked terrified and didn't dare act out. "Gentlemen," Julian said, sounding almost bored, "I hear you're dissatisfied with the inner palace under my management?" The crowd stole a look at my sister, who was intent on eating. Only then did they realize, today, even if Julian wasn't seated in court, the emperor was backing him. If he questioned them so casually, it meant the emperor allowed it. In the end, they were the ones who had overstepped. It seemed the inner palace would never welcome a newcomer in this lifetime. Extra. Ethan Moo, Part 2. Years passed. I grew up and I was able to stand on my own. My sister had ruled for 20 years. The great Leon Empire flourished and all nations came to offer her congratulations. Among the people, Julian was no longer spoken of with mockery and contempt. More often, it was envy. The emperor and her imperial consort had become the very model of a blissful couple. But I knew my sister hadn't been happy these past 2 years. When Julian went to war against the enemy kingdom in his early years, he was left with an illness that never fully healed. As he aged, his body only grew weaker. He didn't want my sister to worry, so he never mentioned it. My sister didn't want him to know her heart was breaking, so she never asked. But when Julian taught me, she would often stare at him with a gaze full of love, sorrow, and despair. I caught her more than once. When I turned 16, my sister told me she wanted to give me the throne. In my heart, I refused. I didn't want to be emperor. But when I saw the faint white at her temples, I finally nodded. She wasn't even 40. I asked her what she planned to do next. She stared out the window for a long time and murmured, "I want to take him out for a while, to see the land that belongs to us." I personally escorted them out of the palace. Watching their hands clasped tight, I envied them more than I could say. The last thing Julian said to me was, "Ethan, wait for us to come back." All right? I never got to see Julian one last time. The man who had raised me for half my life like a father returned only as a cold coffin. In the 3rd year after I took the throne, he was gone. I had the largest mourning hall prepared. Every official had to enter the palace to pay respects. For 1 month, commoners across the nation were forbidden to hold celebrations or play music. Anyone who disobeyed would be punished as for treason. On the day of his funeral procession, the scale was immense. My sister demanded rites fit for an emperor. He was buried in the imperial mausoleum to be entombed together with my sister after her death. Later, I asked my sister why she insisted, despite the minister's objections, on giving him an emperor's send-off. She tugged at the corner of her mouth, cool and distant. Because he once gave me the highest honor. Through her eyes, I seemed to see again that man from my memories, upright and proper, gentle and refined, who taught me to rule the world with benevolence. I miss him so much. Julian entered the palace at 7 to serve as a eunuch. At 22, he took control of the Eastern Depot and held power over the court. At 27, he married the princess as her consort. At 29, he helped the empress ascend the throne. He campaigned at the frontier and shot dead the enemy kingdom's prince. At 31, he shed all authority and entered the inner palace. From then on, he never interfered in court affairs. He taught the young prince and alone held the emperor's favor. At 50, he traveled the great Liang Empire with the empress, living like an immortal couple. At 53, he fell into eternal sleep in the waterways of Zhengnan, returning in dreams to his old home. I once asked my sister, was Julian's life worth it? For my sister's realm and her world he met an early death. Worth it, she said, because he loved me. A night from long ago. A bright red wedding robe, a young girl's shy eyes. In a sweet, lively voice she called, "Husband." One glance and it entered the dream. One lifetime and love was set.